Morning, everybody. Welcome to the Horsemanship Remark Show. It is 6:30 in the morning, Pacific Standard Time. It's springtime, which is my very favorite time of year. The maple trees are poofing out early, so that's pretty exciting. Other than the fact that we have pollen all over everything. Say good morning, Wilder, and then say goodbye. Well, I was just going to say to Corey that you and I were kind of going over her questions from last week regarding the soft feel. And
Yeah.
you want me to just say what they are and then we can kind of
Yeah.
maybe go over them? Because there was,
Read her whole thing and then we'll go over it point by point.
I can't read it all right
Well,
now. I didn't say it's on my phone, right? So,
sure.
and then I do have a Zorro thing that I want to remember to say. And then if there's anything else that is on your mind directly. But okay, Corey had three things, if I recall correctly. One of them is very interesting. Well, they are all actually interesting. One of them is, what is the difference between the soft feel and collection? So I was thinking about that. And one of the things that springs to mind immediately is it depends on who you talk to, because everybody has a different idea of collection, right? And she's asking us what we think, but of course I have to preface that by saying I'm not saying everyone has to have the same definition of collection.
Different people are looking for different shapes and styles in their horse's movement as well, which, is what you're saying. Different definitions of collection, but one aspect of that is stylistically, what do you want your horse to look like when collected?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And it's always funny when someone else is talking about collection and you're like, that's not at all what I'm saying, uh, I try to not be judgmental about that. It's just there's always a moment of like extreme dissonance when you're like, that's not what I'm talking about at all. you know. So the question is, what is the difference between the soft feel and collection? And what would your answer be?
Well, I mean, in a way, I would say the soft feel is a prerequisite, and the soft feel is the turning loose through the whole body and the adjustability that allows you to, over time or gradually, build in more and more balance over the hind legs. That builds more potential energy, more athleticism. And so it's kind of degrees with the soft feel as your kind of baseline. Without a soft feel, none of that is possible. You can't really take it further. Especially if we're defining soft feel as a turning loose and a bending of the hocks.
Yeah, for sure.
Can't collect without that. It depends, like you said, we can make our definition of it, but you could say, well, any bending of hocks is collection, but I think that's getting a little bit loose on the definition of collection, but whatever. We can make our own definition, right? So what's
We
your
have to, right?
Yeah.
Because I think like the perfect example of what I don't mean is, let's say someone puts some mechanism to put the horse's head down and in, but I have definitely seen that with the hocks open, all the way open, and the head, the head is curled, and that's really the opposite kind of what I'm saying. But yeah, the soft feel being a prerequisite to any sort of collection. The caveat to that, it's pretty weedy, actually. We should have finished with this topic because, well, I mean, it kind of goes back to what we were saying last week. I'm just thinking of all the places where we're not riding the horse, where the horse becomes collected.
Yeah.
Yeah, or jumping. or going downhill, they can get really squashed. So things that don't involve us and therefore could perhaps not necessarily include an opening of the shoulder and a turning loose at the pole. Although I would say in all of those things, ideally they would include a soft feel in the best scenario.
So what you're just saying there is soft feel by definition includes an opening of the shoulder and a turning loose of the pole?
I would say, yeah.
Because that wasn't, to my recollection, in our definition last week.
Yeah.
Unless that's what you're meaning by saying a turning loose through the body.
Yeah, because how can the pole hang, the skull hang on the pole, if you don't have an opening of the withers? How can the hindquarters bend at all for any more than, just whatever it takes? So, Michael, I've been back to the gym, over the last week, right? And, oh my God. So speaking of the hocks, like my quads, right? If you're imagining doing squats or anything like that, like you are sitting your booty down, right? And so then in times when we're sore, like this week for me, like, shuffling across the ground with as little bend in my quads as possible. I'm like, oh yeah, this is like the opposite of collection. This is like just getting by, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet, of course, there has to be some bending of the leg. Otherwise, I would not be moving across the ground.
Yeah. And I've been kind of hitting the weights and hitting all that a little bit more recently than I have.
Springtime, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, there was a point in my life where there was no being careful. I just like hit it hard. And even then, even being much younger than I am now, I'd still probably injure myself because I had no real boundaries or control. But, now I'm going into it going, okay, like, let's build strength slowly. Let's not just assume I'm going to go from 0 to 100 in terms of my strength and ability. Like I have to build the strength, build the flexibility. And so that comes into it too, the bending of the hocks. Like I was doing squats last night, like, I can only squat and draw up so much weight at this point, but that's going to grow over time. And in terms of building collection, that's something that happens over time if we're talking about carrying collection through a series of movements across the ground. Let's just say in an arena or wherever you are, moving that way as a, more engaged. Maybe that's what the difference is between a soft feel and collection, is the degree of engagement.
Well, perhaps, except what are we going to say that collection is? Because then we can have we can have different levels of collection. You just take Zorro and his trots, for instance. You can have his pony trot, I call it, that's me shuffling across the ground after orange. And then you have like a normal working trot, which could be very open and free. But you could also pick up a soft feel at his working trot. And I would say that is some degree of collection in the sense that we're defining the front and the back of the rectangle and saying, okay, let's stay collected within this section, right? Then we could have more show trot, let's just say, where it just is more interesting and has a little bit more volume. So that's another degree of collection. Then we have passage, another degree of collection. We have piaffe, another degree of collection. And then if we switch to novella, then we have levade, another degree of collection. So I would certainly say that that lavad, let's say, for those of you guys that are non-horse people, that means a horse like sitting on their hindquarters like a little squirrel. and
And
yep, and in the best scenario, like I could be here all day. That is collection. Of course, lavad is collection. But also a nice, show trot, let's say, or passage in an easier way is collection. For sure. Or if you're talking about just a regular quarter horse, or that's very educated. I guess what I'm saying is the level of engagement on a quarter horse that is very educated is nothing like the level of engagement. Well, I say nothing and Buck is gonna, but it just is a different degree,
and
right?
It'll look different body styles. There will be different degrees of possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Just structurally, mechanically, one horse to the next, one breed to the next. I mean, there's angles of the hip and the shoulder, just in terms of conformation, that this horse is going to be a better jumper just by the way it's put together over against, this little round-bodied thing that doesn't have the reach or the angle of the shoulder that would be conducive to pick your task, pick your discipline.
Mm-hmm. So I guess we have some universal terms. Soft feel.
Okay, I was going to throw this in the mix. Does a soft feel require a shortening of the rectangle? And to what degree? I would say collection does require some level of shortening the rectangle. To what degree, if you will, is that a part of what we're calling collection?
Yeah, exactly. So if we have some universal terms, a soft feel, collection, engagement, those are universal terms that would apply to every horse,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I suppose the question is, what is the difference between the soft feel and collection? And I would probably say that there technically isn't. Because I would say that a soft feel includes a definition of a shortening of the rectangle. Because if you're asking the skull to hang off the pole and become plumb with the ground, which requires a turning loose and all these different things, happening in the body, and to some degree, more of a bend in the hocks, or at least more availability in the hocks, right? So it does include some degree of a definition of the rectangle, and I would say a shortening of the rectangle.
Based on what we were saying last week, I don't know that I would say having the skull hang against that plumb line perpendicular to the ground, coming onto the vertical, is a requirement of a soft feel. Not as I did as our definition last week. It was a compression of the hocks. It was a softening through the body.
Well, if you
maybe a shortening of the rectangle, but to what degree are we shortening the rectangle? Do they have to come onto a vertical, or can they just, because a horse can turn loose at the pole without hang straight down?
Yeah, maybe straight down isn't the point. It's the turning loose at the skull. Yeah, exactly. Really. That's really the point. And I think, though, to some degree, if the horse turns loose the skull, you are going to have a shortening of the rectangle. Yeah.
So, I mean, think about, just backing a horse off a slobber strap. I think that's a spot where it's, at least to me, and I think it is to most people, just in helping people kind of feel for a horse, what it feels like when a horse is turning loose versus when there's that the hard spot in there. So you're backing off the slobber strap. They can be in what looks, structurally, angles wise, like, oh, there's a great soft feel, and be completely hard in the pull. They can even be behind the vertical and be very just braced and tight there. The angle is different, but there's a hardness there. Or they can be well out in front of the vertical and it be soft, that if you ask for a little bit more, the feet were free and it feels pliable there in the pull. And then you could say, well, that's soft, but horse, I'd like you to try something different. I'd like you to carry yourself a little bit different with that softness. And so you carry on step, 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 step until they change their shape, and you release and go, okay, that's what we're after. But I think they can be hard with their head in any of those positions.
Yeah, but then the hocks, I don't. Yeah, you're right. I guess. Yeah, there could be hardness in all sorts of different tiny places with softness in other places.
Mm-hmm. There's a degree to which, you can't have, just be way over curled and have it flow, because we're talking both about the pole, we're talking about the hind leg, but we're talking about the flow through the body, the connection between the two. If we're saying the two ends, right? And I think different positions of the head or postures, like we say, through the withers of the shoulder, is going to interrupt that getting through to the hindquarters. By our definition, if there's not a compression of the hocks, we wouldn't really call it a soft feel. So they could be loose in the pull and have it just be empty too. I mean, there's that element.
I don't think so. I don't really think so, honestly.
No.
I don't think so. I mean, I see where you're going, and we got to keep going down that trail. But I don't think looseness in the pole is possible with a hardness somewhere else, because you have to have balance. Like, I mean, there's a difference between a horse like bracing like that, but truly turning loose, they have to be balanced in order to be able to accomplish that.
Well, when you're saying truly turning loose, now we're saying truly based on my definition and my ideal of what a soft feel is. But what I'm saying is, though it may not be the ideal, there can be a vertical element, a shortening of the rectangle that does not feel hard and braced, but is empty. It's kind of artificial. There's no going through the body in any way, but the skull can flop around, right? To the point of where you basically have no connection to the hind end or the rest of the body, because it's all just disconnected. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it feels terrible, and it's like when you have a horse that's reactive, or it's not very safe either at all. So
it reminds me, speaking of Rihanna, I don't know if you're still here. Hi. The first colt start we did, of course we did a good amount in the arena, and hopefully taught the horse a soft feel in the first couple days, taught them a soft feel. I don't know, connected it to us, right? Somehow, obviously. We should talk about that. Do we have to teach a horse a soft feel, or is it just there and we just have to marry ourselves to it, which I would be inclined to say. But when we were going down the big hill, we go outside of Bucks Arena in Sheridan, we go up this big hill behind the arena and then down this big hill, or what I consider a big hill on the other side. And my little colt, kind of got ahead of himself, and picking up the soft feel and it going all the way to the hocks rebalanced him, and off we went. Mm-hmm. Versus, heaven forbid, you pick up the reins and they brace into that, then we would have been tumbling down the hill worse.
Mm-hmm.
Or, if you did have that emptiness where you pick up the reins and maybe it didn't brace, but it didn't go to the hocks,
Yeah.
seriously sketchy.
Now it feels like we're going to do a somersault down the hill.
Exactly. And which I was already worried about.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're right. That would be super bad. Let's read this comment just really quick here. So Tommy says, wouldn't that being the difference between working in a frame and a soft feel? Well, that's what we're kind of getting at, right? Because I guess I always think about a frame as the rectangle.
I don't think that's how the frame is usually.
I agree. Referenced, yeah.
Referenced, or what's usually understood and implied or meant by the term a frame.
Yeah, you guys say, what is your definition, or what have you heard your definition of a frame to be? Maybe we can just say that doesn't apply to us. Probably, because we are talking about the rectangle, the soft feel, collection, engagement. Maybe frame is just is not useful to us.
I think it's not like entirely a totally different thing, not useful to us. It's just we're picturing it differently. We're picturing an imaginary rectangle within which the horse gets to operate, versus a shape of the horse without a picturing of a rectangle.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're similar.
Of course, I would say they're definitely similar. I don't know that it really applies to. I think it's sort of obsolete in the way we're talking about it, but that doesn't mean I know for sure. I would say, though, getting back to the difference between collection and a soft feel, I would say that collection is a shortening of the rectangle from where the horse is naturally, right? Where they are kind of at rest in any given gait. The collection, to me, when I think of it so far, is a shortening of the rectangle. Maybe a tiny bit, maybe a lot, depending. And I guess to me, you could have that technically. Like, you could shorten the rectangle, as you say, without having the turning loose, which is the soft feel. But then on the other hand, I would say, well, that's not collection to me personally, because I have no use for collection without a soft feel.
Mm-hmm.
But do I understand the word without saying that's not good enough for me? Because I would say, I think I would say that collection is a shortening of the rectangle, but I would also say that a soft feel is a shortening of the rectangle. Now the shortening of the rectangle in the soft feel has a whole bunch of other qualities. So maybe collection just slots into the soft feel, is sort of redundant. That's probably what it is, right? So you could have collection without a soft feel, but you can't have a soft feel without some degree of collection. Ta-da! You are both not convinced. What do you guys think? Yes?
Well, so you're saying you can have collection without a soft feel. You can be going down the hill and have the rectangle shorten some, have the hocks compress, but what are you missing in that case, or any other case where there is collection but not a soft feel? In those cases where you said you can have collection without a soft feel, but you can't have a soft feel without collection.
Well, I guess I'm just saying that if we're just defining collection as a shortening of the rectangle without adding qualities to it, I don't know. The first thing I thought of this morning was that they're the same.
Yeah. I mean, that, to me, it's degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just have to determine where you're going to start calling it collection.
Yeah, and you know what else is
right
fun?
From the get-go. Maybe right from the get-go, you say a soft feel is collection, or you say, well, a soft feel is a softening, compression of the hocks, whatever. and then that a low level collection or like a basic collection, I don't know, like a smaller degree of collection than the collection you might have, down the line or in the next movement or whatever, right?
Yeah. I think, and it's funny because I don't know, do you use the word collection if you're teaching or if you're, yeah,
No.
so maybe we don't even really use that word because I just talk about the shortening of the rectangle,
And the compression.
shortening or lengthening of the rectangle. Yeah. I mean, so if you're going to shorten or lengthen the rectangle in my land, that comes with a soft feel. So, and my dressage coaches, gold medalist, one of them, coached many gold medalists, the other one, international judge, the other one, they don't say collection. Like it's on the test, but they don't say that when they're training. They just say longer, shorter. They use the movements to shorten the rectangle. So they might be, hunches in, shoulder four, whatever, but they're not saying more collected, or less. That's just not the verbiage you use. Diana says, I think I've heard Buck say on his video that the soft feel is the beginning of collection. Sure, yes, he certainly does say that. Yeah, I don't know. We should ask him if he could. Yeah, but see, I was gonna say we should ask him if the soft feel requires a shortening of the rectangle. But to Diana's point, I think he would say yes, or he'd roll his eyes first. He'd be like, why do we have to talk about it like that?
Exactly.
By teaching the way you just described, it helps it as degrees versus exact final position. Yes, so longer and shorter.
Or do a soft
feel. Yeah, but this is important. I mean, I understand why she's asking this, and she's been riding in my clinics, first of all, so she's probably like, what the hell are you saying? But also, there are folks that have ridden with Buck a good amount that their definition of a soft feel is not at all what I think he's saying, and not at all what I mean at all. What I would say we've heard Buck say a million times is the soft feel should go to the hind leg. Over and over and over again, he says that. Now, he's not going to admonish someone if they just barely, start to get a turning loose of the head, or he calls it a tucking of the chin so people can understand it, But would he say that's a soft feel? I don't think so, actually. He says that's the beginning of a soft feel.
Yep. I had a thought, but I don't remember what it was.
I'm sorry. I saw it go across your face.
Yeah, that's why you're always, you pause and you're like, I'll remember what I'm saying. Catch what you're saying, because I know you won't remember it. That's about true. Yeah. I don't remember what I was going to say. But yeah, definitely, Buck acknowledges that if you can't turn loose, I mean, if there's just a hardness and a brace in the pole where there's no give whatsoever, a tuck of the chin, a giving of any kind is a start, but that doesn't mean you're in a soft feel yet.
And really, everything we do should be a start on a soft feel.
Yeah.
Go right
Okay,
ahead.
so that's what I was going to say. So I have moved from, I've never really said collect your horse or do collection or whatever. I've moved even from saying pick up a soft feel to ask your horse to soften. And I'm not sure if that's just a shift in my way of thinking about it or my way of trying to help people understand what I mean by a soft feel. That it's not just the reins being short. It's not just the chin coming in. It's not just, frame. It's the horse softening. Because if you have a frame, if you have the chin coming in, if you have you're range short and the horse isn't softening, you're not really, I mean, I guess it's a start, but I don't even know if that's a start on a soft feel unless there is some softening, right? All of those things are kind of mute unless some turning loose somewhere as a starting point takes place. And I think that's where I've moved from saying pick up a soft feel, which can imply easily just shortening your reins or, some emptiness. Whereas ask your horse to soften is more on what is the quality you're getting out of what you're offering your horse.
Yeah, I would say that two things come to mind. First of all, you can be making things so much worse for your horse and for you if you put your horse in a frame, quote unquote, or shorten the reins, another quote, and there isn't a softening. Now you're definitely going backwards in terms of value. You are subtracting value. Really, really bad. Like almost as bad as disconnecting one rein from the hind leg. Right? Not that I haven't done this accidentally. I'm not saying,
Yeah.
But really, if we're being real, it does subtract value. And then we can't really, this is where I think we go back to the soft feel, having a soft feel or having a start on a soft feel requires some degree of a suggestion that the rectangle is going to get shorter and a softening. And really, like Peggy can attest to this. Back when she and I were hanging out, when she still lived here and I rode Bert for a little bit, I think, you have to go, I tend to have to go back to the theory that the soft feel is something that arrives naturally. And certainly, if your groundwork is good, it will have been appearing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that, of course, removes any requirement that it be two reins.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing that Buck would say, in the short serpentine, you're really collecting your horse. And what I think he means by that is the rectangle is really getting shorter. And even in your hindquarters, forequarters, or just in your hindquarter yield.
Yeah. And that gets to Corey's other question, which was, how do you move towards set it up and let him find it versus telling the horse to do something or making the horse do something? How do you shift to that mentality? I think was the question.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
And you just mentioned exploring, or the horse finding it. And I've been thinking for the last little while here, without going like this, I've been thinking to add to this point, when you're picking up a soft feel, when you're picking up two reins and asking the horse to search, to set up some definition of the rectangle by picking up two reins and saying, search within this rectangle as to how you might move your body. We were saying last week, some horses, like, you actually want them to kind of get long and lower their head. Other horses, you're saying kind of pick yourself up. You got to lift something here in order to get us back over your hindquarters, just based on where their body is. But anyway, you're in this rectangle and you're saying, find this. Well, you have to kind of have an idea of what your horse needs to do in order to help them bring it through their body.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise you're just going, well, like I said, we'll do a soft feel, pick up a soft feel. Okay, I've got my reins short and my horse is tucking their chin. This is my soft feel. Okay, but your horse isn't really soft. And then for your horse to get soft and it come through the whole body, what's going to be optimal at this stage in your horse's development to help it go through the whole body?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And where Buck was saying, don't pick up two reins
Mm-hmm.
until the horse is balanced. And I also think that means, well, it means to me, I won't put words in his mouth, but it means to me that it's available. So going back to letting a horse search or setting it up and letting them find it, do they have the information about what, enough information at the very least to kind of come upon it, right? And do they have the capability physically to do it?
No.
So my sort of flippant answer is cleverly. You know, how do you move from making a horse do it to setting it up and letting them find it, is or letting them move their own body, so to speak. I would say cleverly. But what that means to me is, when we say, I mean, this is kind of important. When we say set it up, that doesn't just mean in that moment. That means in all of the things that you've done with your horse. If we want to get down to the minutiae, is like, how was it when we haltered them? How was it when we led them across the pasture or the arena or the parking lot or whatever? But we don't even have to get that granular. We could just say that in all the things that we're teaching the horse from the basics, meaning stay out of my space, go out and around, gild the hindquarters, like those are the basics. That is part of setting it up so that the horse can find it.
Because the other question that Corey had was, paraphrasing because I don't have it right in front of me, but how do you move from, or when is it right to let the horse explore? And when, how do you know that, when to step in and be like, let me, in my words, and I don't think this is quite how Corey expressed it, but when do you step in and give them more information to help them find it, rather than letting them be wrong for so long that they think, well, this is what you must want. The setting it up part is having given them enough information so they know sort of, either, lateral movements and one rein, groundwork, whatever. They have ideas of where to start to look, that you're not just, like Buck is saying, you don't just pick up two reins and say, good luck, sucker. Like, try to figure out what I mean by this. And, you have this green horse, or this horse that's been braced its whole life, going, okay, well, I just keep bracing. That's must be what you mean. Or a green horse going, oh my gosh, this is a lot of confinement. I don't know what to do with this. I'm kind of panicked and feeling claustrophobic, or, held back because I don't understand what's going on here. Setting it up, as you're saying, is giving them, building it systematically in a way that prepares the horse to search in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And she has an excellent question. How do you know when to keep letting them search, and that they're lost and they need help? So don't accidentally let them get into the weeds by letting the pattern repeat itself, and then them thinking that is, this is so crucial. I was watching someone do a demo the other day, and it was like, you saw this pattern, this negative pattern start appearing, you're like, oh, that's gonna go, you're gonna have some repair. Again, not something I haven't done, but you try to avoid it. That's not really I don't think that's something we can just answer straight away, or you would have to. This is what I would say, is you a little bit need to know your horse.
The thing that I would say first is paying attention to your horse on a level that you probably weren't when you're just thinking, hey, horse, do this thing. I pull here, you do this. Paying attention to your horse on such a level that you're going, when does it cross your mind? Or what does it look like when you're thinking? Does it look like your body's trying to do something? And that So being on the lookout for what is going through the horse's mind, even though we obviously can't read their mind, through their body, we can kind of begin to suss out over time. I think the horse is thinking this, or I can see this expression manifesting itself, which, like you said, Gary or Buck can do, like, without seeing very much. They can kind of, they don't even necessarily, and I would say a lot of times I don't have to get my hands on the horse. I can just see that horse is searching or that horse isn't, right? Or that horse is feeling lost and panicked. They need you to either slow down, or you need more information, or you need different information.
Or
Reading,
the horse is waiting for you to wrap it up so
yeah.
they can move on.
So I was helping someone yesterday get their horse to think about stepping up on a pedestal, and the horse would go up very interested with his nose, and would kind of paw at it and touch it, but wasn't interested in putting his foot on there and stepping up on it. That was something he'd done. For her, I kept saying, does it look like he's trying? And she kind of was getting caught in okay, I'm going to ask, and my flag's going to kind of start doing a lot, and the horse is just not responding at all. And she thinks she's asking, and she is, but she's not getting any sort of try from the horse. So on that level, I was saying, not even necessarily read what your horse is thinking, but read what your horse is thinking, in that, are they exploring, what should I do now based on this thing that's in front of me and the pressure you're applying and the energy in your body and the direction you're giving me? Or am I just standing here going, I don't know what you want, or maybe I kind of do know what you want, but I don't want to do it. You see that a lot of times with trailer loading. It's like, well, I know you want me to go in there, but I don't feel like it. And you don't feel like you have any authority in how you're asking. Like,
No, thanks.
Yeah, why would I, So starting to read what a try looks like, and then knowing how to add more information or additional motivation, which sometimes is more pressure, sometimes I took the horse for a second and showed her, and I was like doing virtually nothing, and the horse was responding, partly because my energy had a lot more presence up and down. I don't remember exactly, but I'm sure I used the flag a time or two on the kind of the setup to be like, hey, when I lift my flag, it means something, whereas with her, it hadn't. But it got to where I was doing virtually nothing, way less than she was, in getting tries out of the horse. So it's not necessarily doing more, it's doing something to elicit a response outside of just a blank, I'm not trying anything different.
For sure. And that's where the culture between you and your horse is a culture of, they have unlimited guesses,
Mm-hmm.
and they get to move their own body. If they don't understand that, it's going to be harder.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course, the authority, again, the culture was like, I am directing this, but just get to searching. And so cultivating curiosity and interest in your horse is a little bit the other piece of the puzzle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a lot of pieces. That's why this isn't it's a self-development component, but interest, and then the intellectual understanding that they have unlimited guesses, and you will tell them when it's correct.
Yeah.
Or what you would prefer.
And the experience, not just to, it takes experience, not just to know, oh, the horse is trying, but could use a little more information, or the horse is trying and just a little bit more time here. He's going to come up, or maybe backing off a little bit is going to give them kind of a little bit more breathing room to think through it a little more clearly. And to a certain extent, you just can't escape that experience. As your experience grows, that's going to become, you're going to see those things. But back to, you have to be trying to read that in the horse as you're getting experience, so you can take every interaction with your horse as additional information as opposed to, well, the horse did it or the horse didn't do it. You know, like Corey was saying, like that's the mentality she'd operated in for a long time, and she's wanting to go deeper than that. So.
Well, and I was going to bring up what you had said a few minutes ago of like, you need to, number one, be aware that that's a thing, that the horse coming up with it on their own is a thing. And if you're into this style of horsemanship, then you really care about that. You know, it's about you having the idea and then the horse executing it. It's not about you executing it and the horse being compliant.
Yeah.
Right. And so you need to be aware of that first, that that's a thing. And then you have to, as a human, you have to care about that. And the other thing I was thinking is,
and you have to keep it in the forefront.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As a priority.
So yes, you have to keep it as a priority. But again, that's what I'm saying is like, you have to be aware of it. You have to care about it. And then you don't have to, I'm just saying in this style of horsemanship.
Yeah.
You have to.
So back to Corey's question, how do you get towards setting it up and letting them find it just as an idea, not even when to give them more information or not give them more information, but how do you move from do this horse to set it up and let it find it? And there's two things that I thought of that largely our conversations have really cemented for me as ways or resources that help me think of it in that way more than I have for years prior to this, right? And one of them is, what else could you do? Like, you're doing something, you're responding, you're trying, you're exploring, but what else could you do? Rather than me saying, do this, search around. And the other is a clear picture of, this is the rectangle, look around in here. I'm not going to try to make it happen, which is, kind of what it usually ends up being if you're not thinking of set it up and let them find it. Rather than trying to make them do something, you're saying, here's the definition of the rectangle. Now you figure out what to do within it.
Somebody send me a private message, please. I love that quote so much from Michael. My thing is, but what else could you do? But I love, here's the rectangle. Look around in here. Please, someone type that, because I won't remember it. So please send that to me in a private message.
What I just said?
Yes, what you just said.
Sounds good. You know what's
Here's
funny?
the rectangle. Look around in here.
Talking about quotes. So Stephanie's going to get a kick out of this. Yesterday, I'm riding the Frankie, that Oldenburg that, was very flinchy at everything. And he still is. The other day or yesterday, I had someone working in the stalls that, kind of behind a wall. You can't see, but there's someone back there drilling and hammering. And like, you go through that into the arena and it's quiet, and then boom, and it just freak him out. And so this is Frankie. He's still kind of flinchy. Whatever, but I'm working hindquarters, forequarters, trying to get him even both sides, really come together nice to the right. Going to the left, still sticky, and he's just not, he needed a little bit more to say, look, try something. Like, don't just get hung up here and go, okay, well, we just get to this spot and we kind of get stuck. So I brought in a little bit, a lot of pressure. I was like, come on. And I said, probably in a little bit of frustration, buck me off if you have to, but do something. And Stephanie thought it was kind of hilarious the way I said it. Stephanie thought it was funny. So I just gave him a pretty good slap in the outside of the shoulder or in the elbow, and he came through, and it made a huge difference. It wasn't like, I probably did scare him a little bit in that moment, but it wasn't like he was thereafter like reacting and going through there. It was what he needed, but I'd kind of probably not given him enough information numerous times before that. So then at that point I'm going, come on, when really it's probably my fault that I hadn't done a little bit less than that, but a lot sooner. Anyway, My quote from yesterday was, "Buck me off if you have to, but do something."
Yeah. And Lynn, she just sent it to me. So thank you very much. And Peggy says she remembers that conversation. It was a big deal. And Corey is on her way to work and says it's very helpful. And she'll listen to the rest later, which is very cool. But the other culture element that makes me think of with Frankie is part of the deal is there's no quitting in baseball.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I suppose
Giving up isn't an option as long as you're trying for good.
Right.
But when you decide, you're done, not like done as in I want to quit. Like people often say, well, my horse he just quit. You just decided he was done. Okay, but I think you're kind of maybe just putting that on your horse. More of I've kind of given up searching.
Mm-hmm. And I do see what you're saying in the sense that we have responsibility to add those ingredients, right? How much have we cultivated interest and guessing and confidence to guess? How much have we given them the information?
And thinking, not just guessing, but thinking.
A quote I have written down that I am going to publish that I was thinking of in listening to some of our other conversations. I think I said this at the clinic, Lynn, and some of you guys will remember. But yes, guess, but don't just guess. I think that's what you're saying, right? Because guess, but then you got to listen back for whether that was right. Don't just randomly guess your ass off and then just be like, okay, I made 100 guesses and now it's like, yes, guess. I want you to guess.
I'm trying to think who there was a horse I was working with recently where it was absolutely that, where it's like, they're guessing, they're doing this. I think I was helping someone else. Anyway, they're guessing, they're throwing things out, but they're not thinking about it. They're just do this, do that, do this. And so it's all just this chaotic mess. So you could say, oh, my horse is searching. My horse has the space. But they're not thoughtful in how they do it. They're just throwing shit at the wall and see what sticks,
So that would be another definition. I don't know if we want to get into the weeds, but the definition between, or the differences between guessing and searching. Because searching implies wanting to find.
Mm-hmm. And guessing
is luck.
Or confusion. Yeah. Implies more confusion and
maybe.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they don't have enough information. Like, for instance, I go back to this with Vivian and the Piaffe. It's like, I have a limited amount of ability to give you information here. And I need you to just guess. Mm-hmm. Which implies an element of luck for both of us, right? But if she has enough confidence to guess, and part of our philosophy is, I will help you. There are answers. I will help you. But that probably is the other side of it. Yes, guess, but do it in a manner that is searching for an answer.
Yeah. Yeah, because they can be confused, I guess, without guessing. While they're searching, they can be confused. It's more their mental attitude while either being confused or while guessing/searching.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
Are they really trying to connect, or are they panicked, or are they mindlessly just going, well, sometimes this makes her happy, sometimes I do this, and this is another option of things we do, but they're not really trying to find you in it.
Yes. And confusion for sure can lead to just hopeless guessing, last desperate guessing, right? And the culture cannot be one of confusion. And that, to me, I think is a horse being confident that the answers, that you'll tell them when they're right.
which is so tough, because I think that's where, in
Mhm.
helping people, where people get very stuck and in their own head, like, I don't know if I am clear in how I'm asking, or clear in what I'm releasing force, and then they kind of get paralyzed and like, I don't want to be confusing my horse, or I don't want to be doing it wrong. And it's like, I try to, without being flippant about that, be like, you can't get around that. Like, you just do your best, and you say to your horse, like, I'm trying to understand this myself so I can help you understand this. But just sitting there going, well, I don't want to confuse my horse and not doing it isn't helping either. But I mean, rightly so, that can kind of be a paralyzing place where you're like, I don't want to make things worse in trying to figure it out and make it better.
And that goes to the culture between you and your horse, and our very first thing, which is we are friends.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I don't know how else to do this. I've never practiced. Well, not I've never. Pretty much though, I don't have any capacity to teach a horse or to train a horse without the friendship component. I just haven't practiced that. I know other people do it, and I don't even think necessarily that, so long as you know what you're doing and you can remove the confusion and you have a very, very clear way of doing it, I'm not even judging that. I'm just saying I don't know how else to do it other than to develop a culture of friendship, so that as I'm learning, I have some latitude to make mistakes, and the horse isn't going to lose. And so I'm just offering that as an antidote to that feeling, because, I might be maybe a little bit farther along than some folks, but as exactly in this Piaffe situation, we have to have a strong culture, Vivian and I, between the two of us, so that we can muddle our way through. I was just going to read what Lynn said here. She said, searching implies ultimate ownership of the answer. You mean from the horse or from the human? I'm not sure what.
I'm guessing she means the horse.
Yeah.
Yeah. The horse.
And that, we've said that too, right? If they get to find it, then they get to keep it. And we were talking about that with the humans, right? If the human gets to find it, then they get to keep it. The culture between you and your horse, or between you and horses, is, I don't know, is that a huge component to you?
Well, I mean, you were saying you don't know of another way to do it, or you've not practiced or done it another way. I have. I mean, not necessarily intentionally, but my personality for years, even though I was part of this, to the desire to work with the horse and, not be just making things happen, but setting it up and letting him find it. But I was just shitty at it. I was more or less being, and even now it's like I have to be conscious of it. I can't just,
it's just degrees of shitty.
Yeah, exactly. or it's degrees of quality in, letting,
or that.
Depending on which side of the coin you want to emphasize, right? Figuring out, I mean, exactly what Corey's asking here. How do you move from horse do this to let me set up clear outlines or clear paths toward understanding something, but still setting it up and letting you find it to where you're not making it happen. Because I, for a very long time, though I wanted to be doing that, talked about it in that way, was very much just kind of mashing the horse into it. And the horse is doing it out of obedience as much as out of willingness and a
cheerful is the word Buck uses.
Yeah, calm and understanding sense, where it wasn't just a getting away from pressure. It was, we're doing this together. And I would get quite a bit done with the horse. I would, the horse would operate the way I wanted it to, but it wasn't cheerful. It wasn't the horse enjoying it as much as I was. And frankly, it's not as enjoyable for me doing it that way. even though that's
Well, and this is where Nathan would say it's not the same. It seems sort of like the same, but it's not actually the same.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting the horse to do something, and that's it. Like the body is,
and you can't get around the fact that the horse can do more than you could ever make them do.
Yeah.
So if you have a super high quality horse, even if they're only doing 50% of what they could do, you can look pretty cool.
Yeah. When it makes me think of, like a horse that just is born and bred to run and loves the game, loves the race. Like they're running on heart. You're not going to get a horse, say I'm talking racing now, which I have no experience in, but just extrapolating and imagining, right? So you could have a horse that maybe kind of has that desire, but if you pushed them too hard early on, you weren't really mindful of the horse. You weren't, as a trainer that kind of just had a one size fits all training, and you could push that horse enough to where the horse didn't want to do it on their own, to the degree they might have if you let that kind of take shape on its own, let the horse find it, let that desire come up in the horse. Because when the horse is in, they're going to give you that 100%. They're
more than you could even know that's there, right? Yeah. It's like that's the whole Jax thing.
Whereas if you're trying to create it in a not aware of the horse or pressure gets me my answer sort of way, they don't own it, and their heart's not in it on the same level, which is what Nathan, I think, is saying. Like it looks the same, but it's not the same.
And it doesn't even look the same, but we can think we're talking about the same thing. Or I used to get really frustrated because this is where the comment to me from him came, is I would get frustrated because I would be having a conversation or want to have a conversation with another human or a relationship with another human, and thinking that we were talking about the same thing when we actually weren't talking about the same thing. And I'd be kind of frustrated and sort of hurt a little bit, just like unhappy about it. And he was like, well, you're not talking about the same thing. Stop acting like you're talking about the same thing. Right? Yeah. That's where, so I like, for instance, jumping, we have some friends who are super high World Cup, jumpers, and friends either directly or by degrees. And I watch it is the point, show jumping, and I feel like I can see the difference between someone who is trying to mechanic a horse around the arena and someone who is setting it up, like, hey, horse, this is the next one we're going to. And then mostly, letting them do it. I feel like we can see that. But back to the thing of like, how can we move from making a horse do it or thinking that we can make a horse do it? And side note, I think that comes a lot from that thing that you and I talked about a long time ago, which is obsessing over the human. Like if you're watching someone you admire, why are you watching the human first? So when we, at times, if we're getting instructed, and again, my best instructors and coaches don't do this, but I've also had lower level coaches in my life that were talking all about me. And of course, yes, there has to be some attention on that, of course, but making it seem, and I'm not blaming them. I mean, maybe it's just the way I understood it. I'm just saying, we don't ever want to make it seem like that is the focus. The focus is, getting the understanding. So, and then I would just say, it's a process. It's a process from make to setting it up and letting them find it, or soliciting this 49-51 partnership. It's a process. But if you're friends with your horse, it can be fun, even while it's a hot mess.
So the jumpers, the 4951, and thinking of, as Buck has said many times to us, becoming one being. So this is what we're going to do. My limited experience of or understanding of jumping, you're still kind of setting the horse up in terms of this is how many strides we're going to take between this. Now, a horse with more educated kind of can sense that and know that as well, from best I understand. But you're still coming up there. The horse is reading you. You're reading the horse, and it's not like, okay, horse, there's the next jump, and I'm just going to fly along with you. There's an interplay going on there the whole time that if that has been a conversational, respectful culture between you, where it is a 4159 or no 4951.
My math.
Did I say it wrong last time too?
No, it's just I usually say all the numbers wrong.
So
4951.
4951. If that's happening between you, then it isn't just horse, you go do this. You really are operating as one, which is the dream.
Harvard math, yeah. That's what Lynn says. Yeah.
Plan.
I can do that kind of math and without a university degree, let alone a master's at Harvard. Yeah, the horse becoming your legs, becoming one thing. It's funny, speaking of Buck, we'll watch videos together, let's say, or he's always talking about how he looks at videos or pictures and just never looking at the human. Not never, but we teach to zoom on legs and head and hock, hindquarters or freeze frame a stride or something. We're typically looking at the person because you could sort of find out all you need to know by how the horse is going.
Yeah, and when you mention the lower level instructors that would focus maybe more on the person, there's an element of you have to learn how to ride a horse.
Mm-hmm.
So, the more low level you are, the more of a beginner you are, you have to have some instruction focused on you as the rider, whether it be mechanically horsemanship, where to put your hands or how to move with the horse's gait at a walk, trot, or lope, get comfortable doing that.
This is why it's important or ideal to have a horse that knows already.
Yes.
So you're learning.
So the more kind of beginner basic your horsemanship or your horse experiences, there's all of that. But even as you advance, there is an element of how do you bring your communication up your leg from this big exaggerated reaching my hand out here to now I can do way less. Well, the horse could have probably done way less way earlier than you. But if you don't have someone as an instructor, not just looking at the horse, but looking at you going, whoa, you can do way less than that, and helping you kind of tone that down, learn how to be clear while being quieter. There are components of that. I would say when you're focusing on developing a horse, your horsemanship, at a certain point, a lot of that should come from seeing what the horse is doing.
Yeah, and that's for sure. And
But
that's why the note is generally do less.
Yeah.
That's all you have to say. Or like, if I'm helping somebody, I'll be like, okay, this is what's happening. If they can't see it, like, this is what's happening. So blah, blah, blah. Then you could give a note. So it's not, you're right. And I'm not saying it's the absence of the person understanding what to do with their body. Really, we could just say, or how we are is sort of the larger picture, but.
So it's not, I shouldn't focus at all on myself, just focus on the horse. There is an element of the human mechanics, biomechanics.
If the horse is doing it, then the person is getting it right. to some degree. So a person can experiment. Again, if you have a culture of experimentation and a safe place to learn that, meaning the culture between you and your horse, of course, a horse that's not way over the top, but the more you can organize yourself and play around, the horse is going to tell you when you biomechanically are correct. A coach is going to make that way faster.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly part of my process, and still is, because I don't have access to coaches, all the time due to time or distance or whatever, dressage coaches in particular, so watching someone else do it and being like, oh yeah, okay, I should, I can play around with that and see if it works. So just the feedback from the horse will also tell you a little bit about what you're doing. And then before I forget, I wanted to kind of go back to the beginning of the conversation, and let's say taking your phrase, here's the rectangle, look around in here, and all of this kind of exploratory and cultural development that we do between us and our horses, that is, to me, basically the main deal in this horsemanship is that level of partnership. Sometimes the question becomes, well, what happens when you have to do things, and you have to do things timely, and you have to do things in a timely manner? Let's say if you're in a working situation, either working horses or working cattle, or I don't know, even
running a test.
Yeah, or writing a test for sure, or something more pressing, like you got to go call the hospital or something. There are times when it's timely. You have to be on time, but I don't see any reason that those two should be mutually exclusive at all, because if we have educated our horse via a culture of exploration and understanding and curiosity and cheerfulness and all of that, whilst retaining our 51%, and sometimes it's a lot more than 51% at the beginning, although I suppose depending on how artful we are, it should stay as close to 51 as possible. But if the horse knows, so they're not in a situation where they have to do XYZ and they have to guess, the more educated they are, the more precise, a cue or a combination of cues are married to one thing, and the horse is sure. There should be no reason why it can't be timely. Mm-hmm. If you have 51%. So yeah. They're not exclusive at all, but I think people get to thinking maybe they are.
Yeah.
So ideally not putting yourself in a situation where the horse doesn't have enough education or practice, they're not sure enough, and then you're in a super finite situation where, in that case, I suppose the horse has to still do what you want them to do as best they can, but that's the result you're going to get, as best they can.
As best they can, and depending how far you're overextending, you can be hurting their confidence, the culture between you, their understanding, creating things you're going to have to kind of rebuild later. Or if you're not so far beyond their experience, or it's just challenging enough, you can be building their confidence and educating them appropriately while you're doing it. So, that's a lot of making the call as you're going about doing things with your horse or educating your horse. How much are they prepared? How far can I take them without taking them too far?
Sure.
Given amount of time. What's the right amount of challenge that we're progressing at a reasonable pace? It doesn't have to be fast, but we're progressing over against I've jumped too far, which is very easy to do.
Yeah. And then we have to make sure that we add those external forces as we progress our horses, so that they understand that it's contextual as well. And it's not like, well, everything being safe and happy, mm-hmm. then this is our culture. But if the chips are down,
yeah.
then all bets are off. That whole thing of, we don't want to end up in a war against their nature.
Yeah. Or just creating such and such a culture that is cheerful and safe and whatever, but not preparing them for something we do want from them or expect from them, whatever that might be, going to a show or, going on a trail ride and just you throw them into the deep end and everything has been very quiet and sedate and whatever.
And that's not fair. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So building,
and
in smaller bites in order to prepare them for this thing I actually want to do. And that takes, you and I were talking about it yesterday. Developing that in a horse just takes time. It takes experience, experience as in hours and in, experience on the horse's part, not just the person's part in presenting that. But like the horse has to get out and see things. The horse has to have a certain number of hours logged doing these things so there can be a consistency in their response based on the understanding, so on and so forth. So it's on us to spend that time and prepare the horse for the things that we
want to do, right?
That we want to do, yeah.
Yeah, and that maybe we need to do, because it's not like we have a prescribed thing that every horse has to do. Every individual just is going to need to say, okay, well, these are the things I want to do with my horse. So let's make a plan for that. Mm-hmm. And then things like, being good to get in a trailer is sort of, I think, high on the list in case of emergency, right? Being able to doctor them is high on the list, things like that. But yeah, I think I often do run into that with folks who have really focused on the horse wanting to do it. But there's this huge gap between their daily practice, let's say, and then the few events they want to do in the year. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, well, we gotta have some gradients
step between, yeah. And I think that really gets to, we've had conversations already about operating on the horse's good graces. You can do that maybe and get away with it if you're safe and quiet in the environment your horse is familiar with. But then when the chips are down, which I think we were saying just a minute ago, if you haven't stretched that or built that, you go, well, I wanted to do this thing. I thought we were prepared, but we go here and we don't have anything that I thought we had. Well, did you work up to that and prepare the horse for not just being friends, but also being friends in increasingly more challenging, depends on what's challenging to that particular horse, more challenging situations. And were you just friends, or were you friends on
with the 51?
Yeah, as leader. And have you just been hanging out with your horse in situations where they needed no support, or have you really learned how to support them by finding situations in which they might need support and going, okay, I am prepared to support this horse with the communication and understanding we have, or I'm maybe not as prepared to support this horse as I thought I was or as I hoped to be.
Yeah. And I remember when I really I had only been practicing on operating on my horse's good graces for a long time. And then I was a bit lost, to how to bridge the gap. But the thing is, yes, we want to solicit our horse's good graces and use that. But then this comes back to a system of aids that works and that we know the curriculum will serve us as we begin to stretch our horses. And I talk a lot about half-truths, and we're going to have to go. But the problem sometimes, it was a problem for me, I'll just say, before I met Buck. The curriculum items were not complete. Some semblance of hindquarters, some semblance of forequarters. And yes, it kind of works when you're operating on the horse's good graces and when there's the external forces aren't strong. But the actual movement that I knew to practice and the qualities within that were not good enough. Were not complete. they just weren't complete. So then I thought I had the item, and then when the chips were down, it just didn't serve. So, many levels of that, I suppose.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I was actually talking to someone about that yesterday. Like, you can think you have, okay, I've got this hindquarter yield thing going, and it's helping my horse, and we've gotten through this, and my horse is so much better. But then you learn a little bit more, and you're like, oh my gosh, that now I can actually help a horse. Everything I did prior to this, like, I can't believe it even helped, because it wasn't operating in balance, or there was so much yet to discover in there. And I just find it kind of amazing, and it depends a bit on the horse, but kind of amazing how much even a little bit of knowledge and doing things not super precisely in many cases is still money in the bank, in terms of it's going to assure some safety or some understanding or some security for you as safety as the rider, but also security for the horse, even though the quality might not be there, as you're developing along. But it's uncanny how every year it seems like, oh, okay, another level of understanding where you're like, okay, now I'm helpful to the horse. I don't know what I was doing last year, but again, yet last year you were more helpful to the horse than you were the year before, so.
The well is deep. We're on our way, tumbling down as best we can.
Yeah.
There's a picture for you. There's a huge well, and we're all tumbling down it together, chatting as we fall.
How about it being on the mountaintop?
I know, going up. I think the falling implies some level of letting go. I think, but
fair enough.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not perfect.
No analogy is perfect.
No, those are very, very imperfect. Sorry. So, okay, everybody. Anything else, Michael Sparling?
No, I'd like to hear from Corey what she thought. If we answered her questions, or if
She went to work, so she's
I know.
Oh, okay.
Not right now, but it'd be kind of cool to hear her feedback and see if there's any questions she had. But
kind of fun, because she has just ended up with in human cultures that just doesn't serve where her heart is. So it's fun to see her arrive in a place where she's like, now I'm home and I'm in a big hurry to get caught up. I know that feeling. I definitely know that feeling. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we'll see you guys all next week. Thank you so much for being here on the Horsemanship Remark Show. And we'll see you next week, Thursday morning at 6:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
8:30 Central.
All right, you guys. Have a good week. See you next time.